Hi, welcome to Mr. Otter Studio. This month we thought it would be good to show you how to make a few different watercolor holiday cards. We decided to break it up into 3 parts. The 3 cards that we're going to show you how to make are a wet and wet wash hanging ornament, and that's a really fun one. You can use circular objects to draw those shapes, or you can draw them freehand. Next week we'll show you how to paint a simple holiday shape. We're going to use a Christmas tree in this case, and then add text or a message over the top. And then the last card we're going to show you is a simple watercolor wash with a holiday illustration inside. That's one of my favorites. Stay tuned for those last 2. Today I'm going to show you how to make the ornament card using the wet and wet wash. This one is really simple and it has an awesome effect. All you need are basic watercolor supplies. Just a simple 8-color watercolor set will work great. A round paintbrush, this is a round number 10. Water, a paper towel, watercolor paper, and this is a piece of watercolor paper that I've cut in half. Pencil and eraser, something that's round to trace with. Cups work great. Colored pencils. I'm using a Micron pen. I'm also using this oil-based metallic gold pen to add some decorations and some string and borders and outlines. Also, of course, masking tape if you want to tape a border. And optional, I forgot to include in this picture, is a ruler. Card number 1, hanging ornaments. There's a ton of different ways to do this. I'm going to show you a few of them. The first way to do it is just to trace your circles using cups for the ornaments. If you want to erase it, I would use pencil. If you want to keep the dark outlines, you could use pen for this part. I would recommend doing at least 3. The second is to use hand-drawn shapes. Any pencil lines that are under your watercolors are going to be permanent, so you might want to just erase any of the lines that got inside of your shapes. Once you have your shapes traced, this is the fun part. So yours might be bigger, you might have more, they can be smaller, but this is the technique and it's the same no matter how many shapes you have. And what I like to do before I start is think about the colors that I'm going to use, and then I just like to add a drop of water to them, just so I have some paint in there that's going to be workable. This technique is called wet and wet, and it will only work if the paper is still wet when we start to paint. You don't have to use the colors that are in your tray. You could mix up a puddle of color, just make sure it's pretty saturated, because painting wet and wet, it's going to be a little bit lighter. So dip your paintbrush straight in your water. We are going to paint these shapes with water, one at a time, so that the water is still there. It hasn't evaporated when we start adding color. Remember, wet and wet only works if it's wet. Also, you can bring your paint all the way to the edge of the pencil line, or you can keep it inside if you want to erase that pencil line later. Just don't cover it with water. Watercolor will not go anywhere where there is not water, unless you tilt your paper or you blow on the paint. So we are just creating a nice area for our watercolors to stay. If it's hard for you to tell what you've covered with water and what you haven't, just look from the side and you can usually see it's a little bit shiny. If it's shiny, then it's still wet. So now dip in the colors you want to use and just dip it right into your puddle of paint. So I'm just going to drop in some blue paint around the edges. You have to do this pretty quickly and make sure you don't overwork your paper. So this is going to just keep bleeding and doing its thing, so I'm just going to let it. So again, paint in your circle or the shape that you drew for your ornament just using water. The more water you use, the better these blends are going to be. All right, once you get that in, go ahead and grab some colors and drop them in. I like to start around the edges. You can see this one turned out a lot different than the one before it. If there are some areas that maybe I want to be a little bit darker, like around here, I want that color to move in just a little bit, then I can work with it. You can also blow it around to create a different effect. All right, now let's work in this one. And this one, I'm just gonna drop color into it randomly. So remember, this is wet and wet, so make sure it's really, really wet. All right, now let these dry and then I'll show you the next step. This is what those washes look like once they're dry. So now you can keep the pencil lines or you can erase them. Now you can add a few different things to these to make them look like the ornaments. We can add the little metal part at the top that attaches it to a string. And it's pretty simple to add. Just mix up a little bit of orange and yellow in your tray. So you want to paint a box on the top. It's like a square. And then leave a little white stripe. And that's just going to make it look like it's shiny. And you can add the round part to the top. So again, a box. It can be as big or as small or as tall or as short as you want. While we're waiting for these to dry, you can grab your ruler and just add a simple border around the edges. This is just going to make it look a little bit more finished to add just a simple border with your pen or your marker. And then once you paint those in, you can decide how you want to attach it to the top of your paper. So you could attach it just using that yellow paint. You could use a black line, like a string. I'm just going to add them with my pen for this one. So I'm just going to loop it around the front side of this, bring it up, and then carry a line all the way to the top. Same thing with this, and same thing with this bottom one. And you can choose if there's some coming in front or behind. I'm just going to put this one right across the top of this ornament. And then you could add a little bow if you want, or a little knot. Now you can leave it like this, or you can add some designs inside of the ornaments. You can outline the ornaments to make them look a little bit more complete. I might just add a little bit of an outline to the top. And anywhere my edge kind of got lost, I might just add a little bit of an outline. But not around the whole ornaments, just in a few spots. And again, you can add more designs and textures inside of these ornaments if you'd like, but this is a really fun way to experiment with a wet and wet wash, and also to create a really fun looking card and really simple, colorful ornament. Also, you could write a holiday message down here. You could add your signature or initials just to make it look a little bit more official. And the third way to do this is to paint a background first before you add the ornaments to the top of it. And you can tape a border, or you can just leave it nice and loose. It's totally up to you. Just make sure you mix up a big puddle of paint in your tray so that you have enough paint to cover that whole background area. And make sure it's light enough that you can see the color of your ornaments on top of it. Also, for your background, you might want to use a larger brush to paint it in. Just make sure you're covering it lightly. You don't want to scrub any areas of your paper. Scrubbing is when you go back and forth over it a few times, and that's just going to overwork your paper and it can tear it. Make sure to let the background dry before you paint the ornaments over the top. The background's dry. Your water might start to get a little muddy after a while, so you can change it if you want to make sure that the water you're using to paint in your ornaments is clear. You can add these little top pieces if you want. They're really easy to paint. I like to use a little bit of yellow and a little bit of orange. So a little bit of yellow and a little bit of orange. So what you want to do is just paint in a box, leave a little bit of it light, and then just paint a little loop over the top. So this would just be that piece that hooks the ornament on, and you can make it a little bit thicker. You can do the same thing with this one. Add the same thing over the top here. You can paint in the strings, but this gold looks pretty awesome too, and it actually goes over the other ones pretty well. So I'm just going to add a little bit of a string to each one of these. And this string could go behind this one, or it could come in front of it. And then you can actually even add a little knot where it ties. So I just do like a little bow with a little string coming out. Go ahead and take your tape off the edges. If your paper tears when you're taking the tape off, just start from the other side or just continue on it. Sometimes it looks good like that actually. So there's that one, and that one works really well. I think it's really funky and really fun. You could come in with a pen and you could outline some of these edges. I'll show you what that would look like. You can also add some designs inside of these. One thing you might want to do is just leave some of your edges kind of broken. Here's this one just a little bit closer so you can see some of these shapes. So this is what it looks like with a little bit of ink around the edges. But you could come in here, you could add designs with the gold, you could come over the top, you can add all sorts of funky things in here. So that is with the background. Thank you so much for joining us today on Mr. Otter's Studio. I hope that the people that you give these cards to, it brings some joy and some cheer into their lives. Next week, I'll show you how to make a Christmas or holiday card using the shape of a pine tree with text over the top of it. So tune in next week for more of these types of techniques and more of these cards. I really quickly just want to add, if this was too hard for you to paint in the ornaments and keep them together, or if you're teaching this lesson to younger children, you can just have them paint watercolor washes on a piece of paper and then cut out circles later and use those circles as the ornament. So you can glue them to paper, you could just have those round circular shapes as your card. So there are lots of things you can do with this technique, but have fun with it and have a wonderful day.